Welcome to Home Business TV. Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Kevin, your host. The Home Business Podcast is about helping you succeed in a home-based business. The foundation starts by getting your business set up for success, including its legal structure. Today's guest, Catherine Delcin, is an expert in getting entrepreneurs set up to succeed. Catherine Delcin, please say hello to our audience. How are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Florida. I hope everyone's doing well, protecting themselves from the cold. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for
Well,
having
you
me.
had to rub it in, huh? I was going to let it slide that you were calling in from Florida, but what the heck? How's everything going down there?
Everything is beautiful. We're enjoying the sun and the beach.
Cool. Well, we also love success profiles on the podcast. Catherine Delson has an inspirational startup story, having immigrated to the U.S. from Haiti. She knows firsthand the value of opportunity and the determination required to turn a vision into your reality. Catherine Delson, let's learn a little bit more about you. Please introduce yourself a little more and the journey into your own business.
Sure, happy to do that. As you mentioned, I am from Haiti. Came here as a teenager and always was fascinated by the infrastructure that we have here in the United States as far as entrepreneurship, being able to build something from zero to God knows whatever it could be, and launch myself onto that track and have been happily pursuing that ever since.
Once you get it started up, there's no looking back, right?
No, no looking back at all.
Catherine, you note that many entrepreneurs overlook the critical decisions they face in the early stages of starting up a business, such as choosing the right business structure and protecting intellectual property. Could we talk about these points a little more?
Certainly, I think intellectual property for small businesses is a highly neglected area. Part of it is that we need more education around that. So I'm glad that I can share a little bit about that because generally, if you have a business, you have intellectual property that you need protecting, whether it be the name of the business or if it's a product, registering a trademark. There's always some aspect, whether it's trade secret, if you have a restaurant and you have recipes, all these things are things that are valuable assets that a business should protect.
What's as a woman in business, what challenges did you face starting your firm, and how did you overcome these?
I think the biggest challenge for us when I started was that I branded the firm as a consulting firm, and we couldn't even. One of the challenges was trying to get insurance, and they were asking back then, back in 2011, what is it? Is it a law firm or is it a consulting firm? Because I don't know what we're insuring here. And of course, liability insurance is such an important thing to have. And eventually, we did find an insurer that was able to work with us and insure what we're doing. But we had to get creative to allow them to focus on both hats that we wear as consultants and also as attorneys.
I hadn't heard of that before. I mean, the problem was that you had to get into two different categories for insurance, and they had to figure out how to cover both of them.
Correct, correct. Because typically attorneys have, specific policies for malpractice liability, and we wanted that coverage. And they're saying, well, you do something else that we don't know what it is. So how do we make sure that what you're doing over here doesn't impact the legal part because we want to cover just the legal part, and we needed both coverage.
Let's talk a little bit more getting into the startup. Can you share some key steps in starting a business and why they're important from a legal perspective? That legal angle to the initial startup steps you take.
I think the first step is your formational strategy. A lot of times people will Google and they'll come up with, different ideas about LLCs or being a sole proprietorship. I think that's so foundational. It's worth having a consultation with an attorney for free. I think people lose sight of the fact that they don't want to spend money and they think, oh, I'll just Google it. But really, what you need is something
The
that's
infamous Dr.
customized.
Google. Dr. Google has a prescription for everything.
Yes, exactly.
Oh man.
Exactly. I want people to take advantage of the fact that attorneys offer free consultation, and you can have a conversation with an attorney that will allow you to set the strategy for what this entity should be that will allow you to thrive as a business owner.
No, what are well, what getting into the Dr. Google problems, what are some of the common legal mistakes entrepreneurs make and how can those be avoided?
I think the biggest mistake that they make is back to that formational step. They will be a limited liability company when they could have been a corporate entity, a type S corporation and avoid certain tax liability. I'm not a tax attorney, but I do understand the consequences of, whether the LLC is taxed as an S corp or a regular LLC. All these different applications, it affects the bottom line. So I think the initial step into entrepreneurship has to be reviewed. It has to be guided by someone who has the
Now,
expertise.
there can be some problems if you like choose the wrong structure or make some, you have to change what you did. I mean, that can get complicated trying to fix those things.
It can, but it's not impossible. So you can do a restructure. You can, recategorize, for lack of a better word. But do you want to go through that, right? Or do you want to get it right the first time when you're setting up?
Let's talk a little bit more about that. How do you help entrepreneurs choose the right business structure and, you know,
We have a
that's
questionnaire. We
okay.
have a questionnaire and we go in, we try to understand in establishing the baseline. What is the goal here? What is the business? What is the industry? What are the risks? And we balance all those things out and allow them to find the right category for a structure that would benefit them the most.
So you have a like you say you have a questionnaire and like what are some can you think of any of the factors that are you look at for determining a different structure?
Sure. So the most important part is understanding whether the activity or whatever the plan is for that business, whether it involves high risk that someone will get hurt, high risk that you would likely get sued for something. And I think we're becoming such a litigious society that almost anything presents risk. But how likely more is it more likely than not that you'd get sued? And then you want to what type of assets do you have? Then you want to make sure that it's a limited liability company as opposed to the other entity.
So basically the risk being that there's a problem or you have some kind of an issue with a client or whatever, and increasing levels of risk dictate what kind of a structure you could choose. It's all about protecting your assets then.
Exactly, protecting your assets and protecting your business too, because at the end of the day, you don't want your business to face certain legal consequences because you didn't adequately structure it.
Yeah, I guess it's too late to come in after the fact and say, oh, well, I'm not actually a DBA. I'm actually an S-type corporation.
No, it doesn't work that way. No.
Yeah, you can't. Um, that's tough to patch up after the fact. Well, let's talk a little bit more about like protecting intellectual property, especially for tech startups or product-based businesses. What kind of advice can you offer there to shore up those businesses?
So generally for tech companies, we typically advise them to create their IP portfolio. For them, it's not just one asset specifically. They may have an entire portfolio that needs management, that needs first of all creation and management and maintenance. We always want to make sure that they're looking at the full spectrum of what they do and how to build that asset for them in the long term.
There's a lot of product centered businesses that are home based. What could be some of the issues you have to protect there with your intellectual property or protecting the assets?
So for product base, generally, I would hope that they have a patent or have a patent pending, some type of protection. Otherwise, there is little recourse for ensuring that someone else isn't just, duplicate what it is that they've taken years to build and fine tune and put out there. Generally, you can talk to a patent attorney, and they would advise you through that process.
I imagine if you, it's a key issue is having the patent paperwork in, having it submitted. It may take some time to get the patent approved, but at least you've taken the first step of submitting the patent and and getting it certified by the PTO.
Yes, and it's, generally they use the word patent pending,
Okay.
when they have submitted that application to put people on notice that, hey, this is something that may be subject to certain protection.
Like, what are some of the other landmines or problems with, you know, initial startup and structure that can cause you legal headaches? Anything else come to mind? That's what.
Um, So some of the landmines, I think, is not having adequate corporate governance documents. You have people entering into partnership agreements, and not entering into partnership agreements when they're partnering together. You have people not having an operating agreement when they have an LLC. Those are all corporate governance documents, right? The California Secretary of State or any Secretary of State is not going to ask you, do you have those? However, when you don't have those things, if there's anything that happens in the future, a lawsuit or something, you are severely disadvantaged.
So these documents kind of establish your credibility for the structure that you have. You know, there's certain things you have, certain meetings and documents you have to have in place for, say, an S-type corp or an LLC. Is that what these documents are
So in
are
essence,
primarily for?
they allow you to follow corporate formalities. And when you don't do that, what happens is that if you are sued, they can pierce the corporate veil and pursue you personally. So they can go beyond the assets of your company and pursue your personal assets. So, scary thought, but, imagine that you created a corporate entity to protect yourself, but then you don't adequately follow the corporate formalities. Then now they can say, well, you're commingling funds, so many different things. And for that, that can cause you a lot of
No, I
heartache.
think that's worth pulling out again. You use the term pierce the corporate veil, and that's a scary term, but the bottom line is what can happen there is you take these steps to protect your personal liability, your personal assets. And if you set up a structure but it's not credible, it can be pierced. That means that your personal assets then are at risk.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, what's my podcast question. What's one thing a podcast listener can do tomorrow morning to better shore up his or her le- business from a legal standpoint?
I think one thing they could do, we're in February. It's the new year. Everyone's doing resolution. Everyone's planning. I think one big thing that they could do is do an assessment of their business, um, and look really objectively at, do I have the legal foundation? Do I have everything that I need to ensure that this entity is adequately protected, or I am adequately protected?
Okay. Bottom line, it sounds like you need to get some professional help. Yeah,
Yes,
not like go to Dr. Google with one of their checklists. They make it sound so simple and easy, but I think that's where the trouble happens.
that's exactly where the trouble happens, because there are people that have the training, the experience, and the knowledge, and they can help.
Well, Catherine Delson, we've reached the end of today's podcast and learning your startup advice, your excellent startup advice for new entrepreneurs. Are there any other points you'd like to share?
I think I'd like to tell the entrepreneurs out there, to stay the course. It's a new year, and maybe things are not kicking off to gear as of yet. There's still 10 more months to go. And if things haven't worked up to this point, switch up the strategy, and stay the course, and to their success.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. You know, look at the time you have and adjust course and make changes if you need to. And there's still plenty of time for 2025.
Exactly, yes.
Well, Catherine Delcin, thanks for joining me today on the Home Business Podcast
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I got the
from
chance to speak with you.
sunny, wonderful, what was it, Pompano Beach, Florida, or?
Pompano Beach, Florida, correct.
All right. To learn more about Catherine Delson and her expertise, please visit catherinedelson.com, our podcast website, for more information on guests. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or at our website, homebusinessmag.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. For more information, visit homebusinessmag.com or the homebusinessexpo.com. I'm Richard Cap Anderson saying anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great legal business startup day. Thank you for watching Home Business TV.